Changer. Hello. Okay, that works. And we got. Okay. Kind of feel like happy. Okay. That should be good. Here. Just one more dessert. Really should set up her mouse stuff tonight. I don't want to do that. Well, I could do them like that. light. I got some treats. It's not for you. What are you looking like that for? Treats not for you. I think it's starting to do this tracking good.
Listen, I'm telling you, Tab, right, Sinclair? I'm calling it. She wants to get a lawyer. She can't.
Where are you going?
También del norte, del horizonte, no me hace nada, me mata el alma. Después del jale, de dos ciudades, me gusta el baile, para calmarme. Tarde, la rueda del baile, el tiempo gastado no es garantizado. Vuela si tú quieres, que nadie te cierre. Tienes que moverte, tienes que ofrecerte. Corazón en dos mitades, tengo más de dos jales. Vivo bien, si quieres caile, a cenar, también pa'l baile. Nos gusta vivir sin miedo, somos más que los gobiernos. No falta para querernos y es fácil, fácil de vernos. Tarde, la rueda del baile, el tiempo gastado no es garantizado. Vuela si tú quieres, que nadie te cierre. Tienes que moverte, tienes que ofrecerte.
That's right. Okay. I'm gonna have kind of a cool, like, chill stream tonight and just art. I'll do. I hate my phrase. No, you're wrong.
Gotta do what you
Oh, that's horrifying. Probably loud enough, but it's not overpowering. Okay. That should be good enough. Maybe like a little louder. What does the stream sound like? Okay. So we're gonna make a meowth in Blender. This is gonna be kind of a chill stream. Okay. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to go over to this thing, which is called the outlier, and I'm going to change it to basically an image editor here. And I can open the images here and basically go find the image I want, which I'm going to find a picture of a meowth. What is happening there? I gotta figure that out later. Let's see here. I think I put it in the memes folder. Yeah, I did. Okay. Here's my reference image. I got it here. And that's about what we're going for. I'd kind of like to also make a desk and chair for my character, and then like mouse movements. But we'll see if we get that far. Meowth, for right now, that's good. So we're gonna start with adding a cube. As we do all projects, I mean, Blender, you nearly always start with the cube. If my Blender will behave properly, that will be great. Okay, so I'm gonna hit Control R and I'm gonna hit external on something here. Ooh, where did that go? Ooh, forgot I had that. Okay, so if you look here, I've got a helper in the corner that'll tell you what shortcut keys I'm pressing. So if you get lost, the shortcut key should always be there. So we're gonna start with the box and we're gonna add the line like that. Now, what we're going to do is I do not want to make both sides of the meowth. I only want to make one side because I can duplicate it on the other side, right? So I'm going to select half of it, just the vertices, and press X. It'll register again. Come on. B here will give me a box select. Hit X. Go for vertices. Okay. Now hit numpad 1 and go to the front view. And then there's a wrench in the sidebar here. You'll click that and add modifiers. Here we're going to add a mirror modifier. And the reason we add a mirror modifier is because it creates a duplicate. So now if I grab a vertex here and I move it, it moves on the other side. So that means you do half of the work. Okay. So we're going to just kind of go for it. We're going to start with the body and then slowly build the other stuff out. And I may actually build the face as a second part, just so I have an easier time animating it later on. It doesn't have to be connected. That's for some reason, like when I was first starting, I used to think that everything had to be connected. That's not true. It doesn't. Especially in game animation and stuff. So we're gonna go and start making it round. Now, This isn't something I do every time because it can cause problems later on, but I think here a subdivision surface modifier might help us a bit because it'll make things rounder faster. So if you look here, that doubles my polygons and makes everything smoother. So, is it like a shortcut key I've got there somewhere? Maybe. Okay. So, I don't have clipping on here. This clipping and merge will make the vertices not mess up. What's going on with my avatar? I don't know. Should I get another one maybe? Get the wings maybe? I have a shortcut somewhere. I don't think that's going to fix it if I just switch avatars. I'll figure out later. Okay. So the clipping here, if I turn it off and I grab a vertice. Yeah. What are you doing here? What's going on? Take the prop off on ourselves. Fix it. Well, that's interesting. Carmi, you're fine, honey. Why do you cry every single time we start a stream? Delete. 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 I'm just deleting everything that may be causing that, I think. We'll see if that fixes it. Okay. So we've got our thing, and if we don't have the clipping and merge on, it'll actually go away from it. We don't want that. So clipping and merge here will make our vertices smoother. Now, we're going for a nice round body here. So we're gonna, you know, don't fat shame for Meowth. So he's a little rotund. So I'm gonna go for kind of like almost like a teardrop shape, but like not quite. Like a bean shape. Let's do a bean shape. That's what I'm thinking. So we're gonna do a nice bean shape here. Okay, if we hit Control Numpad 0, that actually takes us to the back. Continue making the town body. Okay. Now we're gonna start adding some geometry here just to kind of give more detail and allow us to add the tail and stuff. Okay. So if you look here, I've got these vertices here, and that's kind of where I'm aiming to put the tail. So I got that kind of like a round shape there that'll work pretty well for the tail. So we're going to grab that face there and go into our side view and hit extrude. And we're going to scale pretty good. Okay, we're going to rotate that out a bit. And he's got kind of like, I'm just going to draw it out as far as I want and then make kind of big here. So we got that. Now here are our, what would I say? Our rendering options. So if we go into wireframe here, we can basically like create like a round shape there, which isn't quite what we're going for. We'll add more to it in a bit. In fact, go ahead. Okay, so I think right here, what might help sell it a bit is if like that instead. Maybe. Let's undo that all. That was wrong. Okay, I don't like that. What we'll do instead is we're going to take this vertice, which is the point at the top of it here, grab it there, and we're going to go make it rounder here. I mean, I just took you for a nice long walk. You couldn't even go on the entire walk. I know. You're just upset. I'm sorry. Okay, so here we go. That's gotten a bit better, the tail shape there. So now we're gonna shape the tail a bit, kind of making it look kind of like an umbrella, I would say. But like rounder? Yeah. Yeah, there we go. Okay, rounder there, I think. So yeah, this is just me pushing around vertices until I see something I like. Okay. So that's starting to look like something. Let's go ahead and check it out real quick. I think right here, it's a little bit too much. So we're going to pull it in a bit. Okay. Now some of this we're not going to do with... Oh, my dinner's done. Some of this we're not actually going to do with geometry. We're going to do with textures. So this curl bit here, I'm going to do that with textures. I'm not going to bother putting the geometry in because it'll cost a lot of geometry for very little results. So we're just going to leave it about like that. Maybe a little rounder here. And then we'll add final details with the texture here. Okay. A nice tail. It almost looks feminine. Let's make it more bean shape here. Oh no, maybe we want a female. We might want a female meowth. What color is a shiny meowth? I think it's like... I'll figure it out in a second. I'll do a Google search. Okay, so these two polygons here, I'm going to make those the leg here. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of like start shaping it so it looks leg shaped. We're going to go from the side and hit extrude, which is E. I'm going to hit an O here, and what that does is it turns on this button here, which makes it, what do I say that is? It's basically like, you see here how it's moving everything at once? It creates like an area. So if I use my mouse wheel and I go down, I can select smaller bits and then kind of move the areas around it. And this gives me like more control. Hi, thank you for the follow. And then we can go down here. Continue adding like the meowth legs here. And the meowthy legs are kind of bent here. So we're going to go ahead and bend them like this here. You see, I got the basic legs. Bit of like topology theory right here at the joint. You want to add another like joint here so it's easier for rigging later. So I'm going to go from one, and then we're going to go kind of, so that's about, I'm thinking we're going to go and make it like a bit more bowed there, and then we'll make this bit here the legs. So go from the side view here, and we're going to make it like cat-like. I think I kind of decided I want to kind of make this a little bit feminine. So it's like a female, you know, meowth. So if you look here, I've got the little tiny feet here, but we want to make them slightly bigger. So we've got this geometry at the bottom of our leg, and I'm gonna select the first 3 there. He's got 3 paws, and we're gonna go from a top view and extrude it out. Thank you. We're making a meowth. I'm thinking I want to make him a talking meowth. So I thought I'd make a talking meowth. So we've got our, like, geometry here. And we're gonna... Yeah. I thought it was great because the one in the show talked. So I thought a talking meowth would be a cool thing to, like, make as an asset. And it's got pretty simple shapes, so it's great for a stream. So we got the toe out here. So the reason it's kind of merging there is because I have the mirror on. So if I turn this off and I rotate it, it's going to freak out for a second, but then it'll figure itself out. For the subdivision surface I've got on here, it basically creates smoothness. So we want to add a little bit of hardness here back to it. So a good way to do that is add another loop cut there. And it'll give us a little bit more definition at the paw. There we go. So we're going to do that same thing for the next 2 toes. Don't forget to go into the side view to, like, check from all angles, because you can so easily think it looks great in the front view, and then you'll figure out later on that it's not looking so good in the other views. So I got the toe there. Now we're going to do the last one. So extrude there, kind of rotate it a bit. And then we give it a nice little shape there. Okay. So we've got all 3 toes there. We're going to finish the shape up a little bit and then add, I'm trying to decide, that may be actually good enough. Let's look. There we go. Okay, so looking at it with the bottom half done, we're going to start doing the top half, and I think he needs maybe like just a wee bit more height, so we're going to give him, oh, you need to turn the clipping back on. Okay, so. Okay. So now we're going to go from the side and add an arm, just the way we've done everything else here. We're going to kind of make it more rounded there. And then give it, select the 2 faces here. And then hit extrude, which is going to give us the round shape we want. And we can like finagle it a little bit to make it look more round, which is what we're going for. Go back to the front view here. Hit extrude. And I kind of think I want to go with the curved up arm versus the curved down arm. So we're going to grab it. Bring it to about the area we're thinking about. I'm going to cut a loop cut in it. Kind of make it smooth there. Bring it down. Now we got that there. We've got some nice bend to it. The claws, honestly, I'm thinking I kind of almost want this to be like a plushie look instead of like a character look. So it should kind of like, I'm thinking I maybe want to have it hanging from my arms and then like have a little bit of sway, and then the character will talk in my arms. Is kind of what I'm thinking. Or I could have like on the top of my head. I think I could do both of those. But what I'm really kind of picturing when I'm doing this is it kind of hanging from my arms and then like animating, which is what I want. So we're going to pull these arms forward here and kind of together. And what he's going to do is he's kind of going to hang like almost like a plushie. Kind of like a plushie. And then he'll talk. So that'd be cool. So I think it'll be cool. So we'll go ahead and start moving that direction where he's more plushy than creature. Because if I'm going to rig him like a normal creature, you'd probably want to stay with that pose I had earlier. But because this isn't a normal rig, we'll change it up a little bit and make it more plushy-like. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna pull this down. Okay, now the subdivision surface is of course making it look a little strange. And that's kind of what you kind of have to fight with a little bit when using that. So I'm gonna pull that out a bit. I want to make the elbows like more like that. Okay. Okay. I don't know if I like that one. Let's see. Where is it? Is it here? Yeah. No. Oh, mariachi. That's great. Tell me if my music tastes too bad, because I'm pretty bad at music. Okay, we're gonna start making the paws now. It's very similar to the other paws we did, but if you look, we actually don't have enough geometry here. So we're gonna have to solve that. My dog's going nuts. Okay. Because we need 3 paws here, and we only have 2. We don't have enough geometry for 2. So we're gonna shrink that a little bit, and then take this polygon here and pull it out. And we're going to basically make this in to the proper type of paw. Just shaping it here. So we have 3 things to pull out instead of just 1. Okay. And that's not great geometry, but we're not terribly concerned about it because the rigging's not going to be we're not going to actually have a working paw, so I mean, why do we need to have perfect geometry for this bit? That's okay. We got three polygons there, and those will be the 3 paws. Okay. And then we probably have to smooth this out a bit when we're done. So, pull out one finger, and then shape it. Yep. Okay. So if you're looking here now, it's a little bit too round, so we're going to add some more detail there. So we get a sharp corner. So we add a ring cut. I think maybe like that might be nice. You could probably do it better with that though and not waste the geometry. I always think of like, when I'm modeling, I always like to think of like, how can I cut down on geometry? I think beginner modelers try to add a bunch of details real quick. And then that can cause a lot of issues. So it's better to add as few details as possible. So you're not overcomplicating things and making it harder for yourself later. Okay. There we go. There's a paw. Or a claw, I guess. Okay, so do the same thing for this one. And if I was doing a more complicated rig, I might actually duplicate the finger over and over again, but Meowth does not have complicated fingers. He just doesn't. So we're not really going to bother with that. Okay. There's 2 paws. I'm finished with the body. I'm going to take a screenshot and then put it on Twitter real quick. Okay, there we go. Okay. I don't like the fact that they're uneven. We'll have to work at that a bit. They don't have to be perfect, though. But let's take sculpt mode here. So I take this drop down here, and I can go into sculpt mode. And then I'm going to go into the smooth bit here. And I'm going to take this bit. I have the strength up way too high. So I can basically take this and tame the geometry in some respects, which helps a lot. Okay, so I got that going. Okay. There we go. 3 paws there. I kind of want to take them. And if we take this mode here, which is a render mode, and we turn it on, it'll be easier to select vertices. So we're going to rotate here. Now that's kind of a hanging pose, I would say. So I'm going to take a quick screenshot and share that to Twitter real quick. Must have closed my sipping tool somehow. Okay. Don't need a link. Okay. Yeah, I always forget. Oh. Yeah, let's turn that off. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. I'll take at least 1 or 2 screenshots real quick. Okay, so we got that bit done. We're going to turn this bit into the neck now. So we're basically, like I've said before, we're just making a semi-round shape at the top, selecting these two, and then pulling out. And honestly, Meowth almost doesn't have a neck, but we're going to give him a bit of one. Okay. So from the side, it looks a little bit too big. Shape it there. Okay, so go front and pull up a little bit more. Now, I could do the geometry, just extruding it. I don't think it's the best way to do it, because I have to fight it a little bit. I don't want to. We're not going to. So, we're going to add a mesh, and we're going to turn off clipping and merge first. Then we're going to add a UV sphere here. That's good. Okay. So now we've got this UV sphere. It's very nice. We're going to select half of it and delete it. Okay. Control L will select everything in the sphere, and we're going to zoom out a little bit, turn back on the clipping and the merge, and combine them together. Okay. Then I want to grab Z to be more accurate and grab it all the way down. Now we're kind of going to pull. Now we're going to turn back. Oh, did we turn clipping on? We did. It just didn't stick. Okay. Pull in. Come on. Okay, did it that time. Okay. Now we're going to grab it here. And scale X. And scale Z a bit. Basically trying to make it look somewhat similar to what Meowth looks like here. Okay. I would say that's about right. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to model him with his mouth open and then his mouth closed. So again, I'm going to get close with the geometry and then fix the rest of it out. Okay. There we go. There's the mouth. Hit extrude and grab. We've got a meowth there. We may want to add a line there, and that'll be kind of the top of his mouth. Heck, no, you know what? We can do it with textures. We don't have to do that there. Okay. So now we have to figure out the eye. We're going to go in the front view and just kind of mess around with the sphere to get the shape of Meowth's eye. Okay. You see I've made a kind of almond shape for his eye. I'm going to take those in. Go from the side and hit extrude. Looks a little bit off, but we'll fix that. So when I'm doing stuff like this, I'm sitting there thinking to myself the entire time, that doesn't look right. But why doesn't it look right? And then I sit there and have to answer that question to myself over and over again until it does look right. So this is just practice. And a lot of like being able to listen to yourself. Okay, so that's about a Meowth face. Okay, so let's do the ears. Ears are gonna be pretty easy actually. So we're gonna go from the top view here. And we're gonna go for the exact middle. And I think about that looks about like the size of his ears. I'm gonna extrude it out. It looks so strange. It looks alien. Okay. It'll look better once we finish texturing it, I'm hoping. Okay, I kind of want to give it a curve, which is like a little bit of what a normal cat ears looks like. So that way it's just a bit better there. And we're actually about ready to make some, like, we're going to texture it properly, but I think some stand-in textures might help us visualize it better. So we're going to make some materials so we can color it and kind of look at how close we are visually from our reference. So we've got the kind of cat ears there. I'm going to take these vertices here and extrude a bit and then shape again. And those will be the pink inner ears here. Or alternative, what we can do, I think this might give us a better effect. We're going to take the vertices around here and then extrude out like that. Okay. I think the next thing we should probably add is the materials, like I said. So materials are fun. So we go into the little bar over here and you'll see like a checkered ball. And we're going to add black. Yeah. We're going to do M2 Universal, which is the VRM material. And we're going to choose the black here. Then we can go in here and select the stuff we want to be black. My dinner's yelling at me. It's yelling, eat me, eat me. Okay. if I like country. Let me see if I can change it. You know, these aren't great. It said happy, but I'm not sure I like where it's taking me. Let me see if I can find something else. Let's try dreamy. Maybe dreamy will be better. Who knows? That seems better. Okay, we'll do dreamy, I guess. Is it taking the black? Are you taking the black? Apparently it's not. We'll have to change it. Let's see here. Let's do an emission one. And then do the color black. Apparently, yes, it did apply it. I just was dumb. Okay, so we need to do like another one and then just do like an emission texture. We can do this here, I think. Call this tan. So we're going to take this and choose like the meowth color. Hit A for select everything and then assign. I'm going to do this in here. So now when we go to this, we can actually assign it and make it basically color it in. And if you click rings, it's usually a little easier. Come on, take it. Take it. There we go. Do a brush here. Okay, black. And design. Okay, we've got the ears. So we're gonna go ahead and duplicate this. Come on. How do I duplicate this? Blender keeps on messing with me because they keep on adding new versions. I have to relearn the program all over again, basically. Which is, it's annoying. I'm not gonna lie, it's annoying. So here we're gonna go for pink, I believe. We'll call this one pink. And we'll do that for the ears and the mouth here. Go ahead and do another one, call it red. And just so you know, emission means that there's no shading. So that's why I'm choosing emission, because it's cartoony. And that'll give us a more cartoony feel if we choose emission. Without having to do much work. Come on. Okay. Let's do the mouth here. We'll assign that as black. Now we have to add another one and call it white. Okay. So we're going to choose the eyes here. Assign them to white. Now let's see if I can get these, the ring to select properly. No, apparently not. Okay. Blender, I love you, but when I don't love you, okay? So I'm going to assign that to black. And that gives us a bit of an idea of what we're working with a bit. We're going to do one more color here. Maybe two more colors. We're going to do the tan here. And scan. Okay. I always kind of feel like, I guess it's a little weird, but I always feel like we're gonna do a little trick here because I'm feeling a little bit, I don't really want to do that. So we're gonna select a sleeve here and then hit Control L, and that's gonna select the correct part. Select the tan, and then that'll give us our tan there. Okay. So next we want to do our tail. So I'm gonna select a ring here, hit Control E, mark seam, which will, it's basically, it's gonna help me unwrap later anyway, so. And then I can select a polygon there and hit Control L, and it selects everything. It just kind of sections off the model a bit, which makes it easier to like mess with it. Okay. Not bad. We're gonna have to work on it a bit more. It is a basic shape of, that is a basic Meowth shape though. So that's good. Gonna go ahead and select black. I've got the Meowth there. Got a couple other things we want to add. I think we had to add one more texture. I think I forgot. Oh, material. I get those two words confused. The texture is the flat thing, and the material is the ball. I get those confused a lot. So we do emission there, and then we'll choose the yellow here, and we'll call it yellow. Go. So we're gonna make the eyes real quick. I'm gonna select these two vertices here, and this will be a little shocking, but I do not need. I'm just gonna pull off some vertices from that. I'm not gonna make like an entire eye thing. So that's gonna give us our eyes real quick. Pull it. Oh, Harmony, did you just fart real bad? Whoa, baby. That gives us our eyes, and we'll shape them a little bit better, but we can move those around pretty easy and animate them and not have to worry about the geometry as much. And because the eyelids are pulled out, I can actually like make him blink still, so we'll do that. Okay. Next thing I kind of got to do is I want to add some whiskers. So we're going to take that vertice there, I think, and pull it out. And then loop cut there. And then I want to make it super pointy there. So I'm going to go into my rendering options and get wireframe and select those. And then hit M and then merge its center there. And then pull it out. If you look, that looks pretty whiskery there. Okay. So next we want to do one at the bottom, like another one here. Hit E there. Hit R. And then we're going to make one at the middle. Pull it out. We've got our Meowth. So one last one at the top, and then we have to add our gold. Okay. Okay. Select the vertices here. Mark M and something that's center. And then we've got our basic Meowth. We need to add the gold bit. I always want to add the paws, like the brown paws. technically, he shouldn't, but I'm sorry. I need those to be brown. It just looks better visually to me. Okay, so he's a little bit too, I would say, skinny. So we're gonna pull him out a bit. Maybe from the front too. Okay. So we need to add the gold bit. We're just going to take a polygon from here and hit Shift D, and that's gonna pull it out for us. Oh. Rotate it. We're gonna assign it yellow. And grab it and pull it out. And I think, like, technically we could do the lines that has geometry, but I don't want to. I think that's would be great as textures. So pull that right into his front. We make it a bit smaller and then extrude so it's more round. Now, because of subdivision surface, this is a little bit round. I kind of want to be sharp here. So if we put a ring cut in there, it's going to make it sharper. Let's see, what else am I missing here? I think I want to add the teeth. So we're not going to add them. We're going to Shift D that. Assign that to white. And then extrude again, and then scale. And then hit Control L to select it all. And kind of grab it, pull it, and put it where it's supposed to go. Okay. I'm trying to think, like, where would I change this? It looks to me like the head is a little bit out of proportion. So we're actually going to take the body here. Oh, come on. Hide. We're gonna make it bigger and like wider. Alt H. Control C that, and then a little bit bigger, I think. Now, it looks a little bit more like it's a little bit more football shape. So we're going to take the polygon on the side here. And we're going to scale Z that with an O select and then scale Z that. And what it's going to do is it's going to make it sharper there. That's about what I want. Okay. So, I know you're probably asking me, but what about the black lines? You can do the black lines. It's not hard. I'll show you how to do it. So we have to go into modifiers here. And what we want to do here oh god, it's been so long since I've done this. I believe we do this by solidify. It's so cute! I almost like it better that way. Okay. Okay, so why are we doing this? Even thickness. Okay, so we go into normals and we flip them. Why do we flip the normals? I'll tell you. So here's a bit of like how Blender works. So edit mode, come here. Of course not. Okay, come here. It's not gonna let me do that. Wait a second. There we go, okay. Now you see what I've done here is I've actually added a second piece of geometry. Now, normals are the way that a polygon is facing. If a normal is facing away from you instead of towards you, it will not render. So the way most people do, Alt H there. Like most people do material offset. They flip it. So then what happens is the material at the back, basically, like it's hard to describe. Let's see if we did it right. Maybe. Oh, I had to add a camera. Okay, so let's add a camera real quick. Okay, so I added a camera, and then I always add a Susan monkey to like control my camera. So let's do that. Here's Suzanne. We're gonna add her, and we're gonna go down to where's the viewport display for Suzanne? Come on. Here we go. Okay, so viewport display. We don't want her texture. We want her wire. We want her in front. So like that. So she's not going to render anymore. Now we're going to take the camera, and then we're going to select Suzanne, and we're going to hit Control P. Now when we hit 0, which goes into the camera view, we can grab Suzanne and then basically place our camera by moving Suzanne around. Just what we're gonna do. So take the gizmo here. Yeah. Okay, so let's try render here. See what that looks like. Didn't do exactly what I was hoping for, but it's looking pretty cute. We may have to give up on the we may have to do the lines at the end. Oh, hey, how's it going? But yeah, I want to do the lines. I've done them before. I've just forgotten how I did it. Flip high quality. 1 maybe? F12 again? That was wrong. Okay. It's basically what it's doing, yeah. I think I'm doing it wrong. Okay. So we've got our mouth, and we want to have it kind of swinging from the arms, and then like move its mouth. So 2 things we have to add. We have to add an armature, and we have to add blend shapes. So we're going to add the armature first, because that's what I'm most familiar with. So we're going to go add here, armature single bone. We're going to go to our viewport display at the corner here, which is the orange box. And we're going to do wire in front, which will make it always visible inside the mouth, even when I'm moving it. So we're going to take it and go into edit mode, which is just Control T. And then, because the materials are making it a little bit annoying, we're going to just go back to non-colored. Okay. So we've got our bone here, and we want the swing to look like that. So we have to have the large, what is it? The large side at the top in order for it to work properly. Go back into edit, and we'll add 3, which I feel is like a good swaying bit there. So we're gonna go ahead and add those. And then we'll scale X -1. So what that'll do, it'll give us a nice sway to our Meowth when he's in our arms. Okay. Trying to make the bones match for both legs because I'm a little bit of an OCD person. Okay. There we go. Okay, so now we're just going to Shift D that and add another bone here. And here, we're actually going to swing this way here. So the arms will swing a bit too. And I've noticed that for this kind of thing, the more bones you have, the more dramatic the bone. So we're going to do something like that. And I want to change a little bit of the geometry of the actual cat here. So we're going to go to object mode and select the cat. And we're going to select the tail and hit O here so we can move him around a bit. We'll make it more to the side when we're done, but I want his tail to like swing beneath him too. Then his feet. Okay. We're gonna grab him. Rotate. Grab them. Now you can see how that's looks more like a hanging cat. What it's gonna do is like jiggle a lot. So that's what we want. So we're gonna go ahead and take the leg and Shift D that and make the tail also have 3. Okay. Now I have to figure out like what the parent structure is gonna be. So the legs. Oh, the tail doesn't look great from the side, does it? Fix that. Okay. We're going to take this one, and this one. And we're going to, instead of connected, we're going to keep offset. Okay, now here, it's a little bit strange here, but I think what we want is this. Okay, so we got these 2 bones here. Okay. So this is our root. So, because we want our dangly physics to be from there. And then I'll come down here. I guess what we can do is... No, that's not right either. Let's see. It's kind of inverted from where it normally is, so I'll have to think for a second. We want it to dangle from there, and I want it to continue down here. Okay, so let's kind of do like... Maybe I'm overthinking this. We'll kind of do like a normal shoulder setup here. We have 2 of these. And then... But we're doing backwards, so... Like that. Like that. And then... Connect them, I guess. Okay. Control P, keep offset. And then Control P, keep offset. Let's do a pose mode real quick, see what happens here. No. I did it backwards. Okay. Let's try pose mode again, see what that looks like. Yeah. That's kind of more what I want. Okay. This bit's weird. Okay, so... Oh, I went to the wrong edit mode. Open the skeleton and go back to edit mode here. Okay. Keep offset. But that's wrong. That'd be fine. I think. We're just gonna not overthink it and just... We'll parent it all to that. Oh, excuse me. Oh my gosh, that was a long one. Okay. I'm lying. I always have really bad sneezes. That was actually a cute one for me. Okay. I'm actually wanting chocolate. Okay. So we've got the rig. Strangely enough, I tend to like to do the rig and the texturing at the same time. But if something's wrong with the rig, I want to know before I finish textures. Because otherwise, I have to redo the geometry. So let's give an armature real quick by selecting the meowth. And then shift left selecting the armature and then hitting Control P. And then selecting with automatic weights, which will give us close enough. We might have to fix a little bit, but I'm hoping we won't. See here, pose mode. What's that look like? Yeah. That's what we want. Yes. Okay, so it is mirrored. Is why it's giving us that strangeness there. Just give us 1 second. We're going to go back into the meowth. And we're going to go ahead and apply this. And then do it again. And then hit Control P. The armature weights. Then we're going to do pose mode. And we're checking out what that looks like. Looks like I messed up right there. I'll have to fix that in a second. That's basically what it's gonna do there. So that looks like it'll be very active there, but it will have a little bit of jiggle in the arms too, which is what we want. Do we want jiggle in the ears and the whiskers? We could do that too. Why not? Or why not go all the way? So we're going to go back into the armature here and go back into edit mode. And we're going to add... I think we don't need... Suzanne, I love you, but let's get out of you real quick. Hide Suzanne. Go back into edit mode. Oh. Extrude there. I don't think we need 3 bones for the ears. We'll just do 2. Okay. Go ahead and give the 2 ears some structure there. Give that other one some structure. And then the whiskers. Doo-doo-doo. Hey. Okay, let's do like a big bone here for the head. Now, one thing here, this bone here is not really supposed to deform things. It's like gonna be where we anchor our cat, and not really, we don't want it to deform. So we're gonna uncheck the deform box there. That way the weights don't create it. So we've got our head bone. We're gonna select one of each of these and click that and hit Control P, key offset. So now all these are connected to the head bone, and we're going to connect that also to the root. And we're going to mess a little bit to make the bones all line up here. Probably should name them, but I'm bad about that. Technically, I didn't have to, like, merge the mirror stuff. I could have, just not done that and been okay. Okay. Got that. There we go. So now, everything will, like, jiggle. So, I'm gonna go back, add it, Control P that, automatic weights. And we're gonna pretty much have to weight paint it probably. So we're gonna select the armature and then the caricature, and then we're gonna go into weight paint here. Now when I hit control here, you're gonna see like where stuff is. Now I don't really like this part much. It seems like it's fun because it's like rainbows, but it's a lot of work. Okay, so we're gonna make the like middle of the head super red. Make sure the back also gets super red. Yeah, it sucks so bad. I think they make it rainbow just so people will not kill themselves. Ah, my Duolingo owl's yelling at me now. Oh! What did I do? I can try. I was watching the new Stranger Things today because I haven't watched it yet. It's been like probably a year since it's been out. I just don't care. I wanted something new to watch because I've been watching like Monty Python again for like the millionth time. Yeah, I kind of forgot too, and I was looking at it today, and I was like, Netflix was suggesting it to me, and I was like, I was doing like social media stuff and had like, just wanted something on in the background. I'm pretty sure most of the rest gonna be okay. It's the head I'm worried about the most. Everything else should probably be decent, if not perfect, but the head's the finagly bit. Yeah, I forgot too, so I decided to watch it today, but I wasn't paying attention. Okay, so that's good. So once I've gotten the rig, like, I at least know the rig's gonna work, then I'll start unwrapping. Because I'm not sure if other people do that, but that's what I do. I do the rig first, and then I kind of do the unwrapping bit. Otherwise, I'll make a mistake with the rig, and or the geometry or something, and then I'll get to the rig part, and I'll have to redo the entire thing because let's do around the whisker. I think that looks right. I don't like that one. Let's see the other one. I want to like look kind of cool, the UV wrap, so it looks like a Meowth and the UV map. Tell me if the music annoys you. I was really, I wasn't very confident on it recently because I was really out of practice. I used to like live in Blender. I used to live in there. In college, I actually would like, I would put Blender on a USB stick and I could actually go run it on the like school computers in the library. So I would do a lot of Blender during college. I lived an hour away from college. So it took me like, if I had time between classes, and I mean like I had entire like 6 or 7 hours between classes sometimes, and I'd finish my homework some days. So what I'd do, I'd go to the computer lab and I'd, you know, do Blender for 6 or 7 hours. for all of college. So I should be more confident than most people. But Blender's like one of my favorite programs. It always has been. For like 10 years. Okay. So we got our seams. And I'm kind of trying to think of like what I want the end product of the UV map to look like. And I want the UV map to also be cute, if possible. But also, I don't have to do like, I'm doing the back a bit like I normally do backs. I don't know if that's really necessary. But I guess I'll do it anyway. I'm just force of habit. We'll do a little there, mark seam, and then we can just mark seam, and then here, mark seam, mark seam, yeah, mark seam, mark seam. Mark seam. Mark seam. Okay. I think that's maybe at the top of the head. We don't have to do the whiskers here. Okay, mark seam. Okay, mark seam. Select one of these and one of these. Yeah. Okay, mark seam. Okay. That should be most of it. Okay. So we're gonna go here to UV editor. You unwrap. Let's see what the damage is. Okay. That's pretty obviously the head. That's the head. Okay. So that's the coin. I do not know why I did that bit there. Okay, so here it's tail, of course. I'm gonna kind of organize it a bit so I can look at it and tell what parts are which without being confused. So here's the tail, the front and the back. I don't want to do the weight painting again. We're not doing the weight painting again. We're just not doing it. This would be... Pretty sure that's the paw. So we're going to kind of do it here. You know what, whatever. We're going to do this. Scale X -1 here. And these are actually the same bits here. Okay, so this... Scale X -1. Okay, so that's gonna be the paw. It's not gonna be exact, I don't think. That close. Okay. Grab both of them, bring them up. Now we have our meowth. Tail and paw, we can kind of see which way they are. Grab that. E Control L that. Grab it. So we got those. I do not know what those are. Always a one bit that I'm like, I don't know what that is. I think that might be the hand. You might have to redo the hand real quick. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, that's gross. I don't want to do that. Okay. There. There. Just going around the paw real quick. Mark seam. Here, I don't need it. So I'm gonna go around the, like, armpit, I guess? Mark seam. Okay, let's try it again. And technically, I don't even have to do any of this. I could just, like, direction view. Yeah, we did it! But that's cheating. Okay, E, mark seam there. I'm gonna go ahead and Control L that. And then you project from view. And that'll give us a little bit better there. Control L, backwards. That's good. Okay. So now I got our front and our back of our meowth, and it looks pretty... It looks like a meowth. That's good. But easier to texture. Okay, Control I think. Okay, I think it's okay. Control L those. And we'll just make them, like, pretty obvious they're whiskers. Put that there. Put that there. So now that's... looks a lot more cute. Okay, so let's do this one next. You project from view. Okay. Control L those. Grab those and put those there. We're gonna take these and select them real quick. And UVs, we can actually pin these here. And they'll, I like to look at those. I don't want them just to unravel themselves. And if we pin them, they're not going to. They'll stay where we put them. Go ahead and pin those. Okay. Now, I think that we can probably do the body. Like do different limbs, like separately, I think will be good. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna take this seam off here because you don't want it. There's seam. And instead we're gonna go with our front and back scheme here. The mark seam, clear seam there. And then we'll go around the tail here. Okay, mark seam. Okay. So now when we select this, we can Control L Missed some. Always miss some. Okay, so we make that. Mark seam. Go ahead and Control L that. Okay, so we're still missing something here. Probably at the neck. Alt I, Control I, hide. Let's see what we got. Yeah, it's the neck. Okay. Okay, Control E, clear seam, and then mark these here. Mark seam. Okay. So I got our body. We're gonna select it. Hit U, project from view. Got the body. Scale it. And then we're gonna pin it real quick. Do the same to the back. U, let's see. Yeah, come on. U, project from view. And then Control L. That looks wrong. That's probably right though. Okay. Okay, so put that there. Go ahead and pin that. Now we're gonna Alt H, which will give us everything else. Control L. And this we can't really do that to. See, we're gonna do unwrap. U. Not U project? Yes. No. U. Cylinder project? No. This does not like me. This one should be pretty easy to do too. Am I missing something here? Maybe. I'm missing a vertice or something. Check real quick. Oh. Don't like you. Let's see if that fixed it. Unwrap. That's better. Doesn't look like an arm though. Just to make, because the textures do not have to be super flat, we're gonna make this look like an arm. Just so I know what it is. Because it's gonna be the same color. So this part's not really that vital. Yeah, I know, Critter. We're doing UV maps. Did your art block get any better? You should be sleeping, you know. Let's put some sleepy music on for you. See, we got classical. There we go. Oh, that's good for you. So that's good. I'm glad you got 6 hours of sleep. You got some bad insomnia. Yeah, unwrap. The meowth arms just do not like me. Just try to do it this way. They just don't like me. Yeah, we're making a talking meowth because I thought it was hilarious. My brain. I mean, that does not look like an arm to me. Blender, what are you doing? Oh, I think I see it now. Okay. Okay, Blender. I take my insults back. I take my insults back, Blender. You know better than I do at all points in time. I know this. We both know this. Okay. So that's the arm. UV pin it real quick. Yeah. No, we're not gonna worry about that. That looks good. We're gonna do that. Yeah. Okay. Both of these. UV pen. And I'm hoping these just unwrap real nice. Come on. Unwrap? Of course not. Unwrap? Jesus. There we go. We're gonna cheat. Pin. All that, and then pin it. Okay, what are we doing in the back? Probably these. Control L. Oh no, I can't take this. The classical. I tried. I can't take it. It's okay until it goes into a minor scale, and then I'm like, no. No. Oh. I can't take minor scales, critter. It's my one weakness. I'm joking, that's not my one weakness, but it's one of them. What is Dream Core? Jazz? We can do jazz, probably. We can do that. There you go, Jazz. Okay, there's those. UV pen. And then L3, U, project from view. Okay. I think that's all of it. Now we're gonna unpin them and basically like arrange them properly. These are the front paws. And these are the back paws. And then I don't know what that is. Oh, that's the tail. Okay. We got the tail. Okay, the tail. We got the paw. And the other paw. Jesus. This is my least favorite part. This is weight painting. I would just... That was my job. I would die. I would just not be able to live anymore. So that's the arm. Okay. Okay. That's the arm. That's the paw. Where's the other arm? I've lost an arm. Where did my arm go? Where'd the arm go? My arm disappeared. What? That's that one. Oh, it didn't look like an arm. Okay. What? The hell? Okay. Okay. I want it to look at least somewhat like Meowth. Because I'm a crazy person. Nobody's ever even going to see this. I'm still trying to make it look nice. Crazy person. Okay. that looks pretty good. I think I want to make the head slightly bigger. I'm so hungry now. My dinner's done, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, but I don't want to get up. That's the sad part. I'm like, I don't want to get up. Okay. Man, I'm so hungry now. I should go eat food. But I don't want to get up. That's the thing. I'm so comfortable. I'm in so many wires. I don't want to get up. I'll do it in a second. New. Do a white. Okay. I'm gonna do the white. Okay. Hit okay. Now. No. So. Texture paint here. Yeah. Do an image texture. Oh, I didn't save it, did I? So. Hey, Lamar, how you doing? Haven't seen you in a while. We're making a meowth that talks. For like my Pokemon streams, so I can like have a meowth that'll talk. Okay. I mean, I could. I might. It's not designed for it, though. I'll have to do some changes to it, but most of it will. I could probably put it, like... I could make it into, like, a phone holder or something like that. That'd be kind of cute. Let's see, what am I doing here? Oh, yeah, I was painting. I actually had, like, a meowth picture here. So I could pick colors off of it. There we go. We're just gonna paint it. And I'm pretty sure I got the UVs right, so it shouldn't have any problems. Nice. It's already rigged, so... I need to add... like a mouth movement thing to it, and then I guess finish it. Get all of it. Okay, got that. Next we're gonna do the paws, I guess. And technically Meowth doesn't have, like, fingers here, but I kind of want to give him those because it makes me feel weird he doesn't have, like... Oh, I did something wrong there, you can tell. I really liked the TV show as a kid. Did you hear, like, the backstory of Meowth, though? It was pretty bad. Oh, good god. I can't do it here. I have to do it the other place. Let's do the other colors real quick so I don't have a place to, like, drop them from. Okay. Critter. Are you feeling bad for Meowth? I would. Meowth had a horrible backstory from what I can remember. Beautiful. We'll just leave it like that. There we go. Now I'll paint it in here. That's true. Jesse and James were like my favorite part. I figured out what that means. Everyone was saying goat all the time. I was like, what the hell? I had a goat, I hated it. Like you're saying goat like it's a good thing. I hated that goat. That goat was a devil. No, it was possessed. It was possessed goat. It was so horrible. Like my mom, okay. Yeah. Goats are just not good animals. If somebody tells you they want to give you a goat, say no. Say run away, the other way. And maybe I should have done the unwraps a little bit better. It's hard to be great in everything in Blender. Yeah. Unwrapping's my weakness. That and weight painting. Because I get... About that point, I start getting really... Really, just bored. I'm just gonna say it. I get bored, and I'm like, I want to be done now. Can I be done now? Cool. That's horrible. Oh, I didn't do the UVs as well as I thought. There we go. Why? Lamar, you like weight painting? But why? Is it the rainbows? It's gotta be the rainbows. It's the rainbows. You just kind of get... You gotta get addicted to it. Get addicted to the rainbows. Look at this... Look at this horrible UV job. Oh my god. What did I do? I was so proud of myself, and then I got to like painting, and I was like, "Oh no, oh no." I'm gonna have to redo the face. I can see like if you get in a groove, you could probably get used to it. It's not my favorite part, I'll be honest. I have to go back to UV painting. He's possessed. It's okay. Yeah, it kind of is melting. He's a melty. He's a melty meowth. Maybe I can fix it. Maybe I can fix it. Well, we might... I don't want to go back to... I don't want to go back a step, but I might have to. Might have to. If we separate out the eyes and the mouth, it might make it a little easier. And for the ears. Yeah. Might do that. It is. It's melting. It's so bad. Okay. Oh. Meowth. Meowth. So bad. Stew. We'll finish painting it and then I'll decide if I want to redo it. Maybe I can fix it. I can fix it. I can fix it. No, I can't fix it. I give up. I'm not fixing that. Okay. No, it's not good. It's very bad. I was so proud of myself. I was like, I haven't done this in so long. I'm doing such a good job. And then, you know. the disaster. Let's separate out some of the parts. Seam, mark, seam. Okay, I think like right there. We're good. E, mark, seam. Let's do around the eye. Control E and then mark seam. I don't want to do this, you know, for reals. I just want to have a meowth. Mark seam. And then Control E, mark seam. You're not funny. Yeah, you are. I'm joking. But I think I can make it work. Shh. I can make it work. Top eyelid? Can you hear it beeping? It's beeping. Yelling at me. I am hungry. But I'm such in a groove. I'll eat it in a second. It's not like it's good food. It's broccoli. With like some cheese sauce on it. That's it. It's not like it's good food. Let's see. We'll fix it. Oh my god. No. No, 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 no. Bad meows. Yeah, I kinda need to eat. I'll be right back. Yeah. Need to eat. I might take a picture of the cursed meow first, though. How bad is it? Yeah. Take her. See? Yeah. Where am I? Hey, I post. I get food. We're back. Did you see it? Was it funny? I spent a little bit of time on that, so it's good to know somebody saw it. Okay, guys, I'm probably gonna take like a 30-minute lunch or whatever. I might come back, but thanks for coming by. I'm stupid hungry now.